Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Truergy, also known as Byron of Sidious. It's been a little while since I did a book review video of any sort, and we are returning once again to the masterful work of Mr. Peter Straub with his 1980 Shadowland. A great number of authors have attempted, and this is going to be a spoiler-free review, just a note. Sorry about that. A great number of authors have attempted to recreate the wonderfully weird majesty of prior titans of weird or cosmic horror fiction. Stephen King, Clive Barker, John Saul, Dean Koontz, just to name a few. In some ways, they've all come very close, or in a few instances, done their own thing so masterfully as to render comparison or contrast unnecessary. For Master Barker, this is especially true. One author in particular has proven more than worthy of inclusion into the ranks of titanhood, and that fellow is Peter Straub. A little over a year ago, I positively gushed over his deceptively simply titled Ghost Story, and just the other day, I finished reading Shadowland, yet another superior example of Straub's storytelling prowess. While not as impressed with this work, I nevertheless was ensorcelled, an apt word considering the nature of the story, as much of it involves classical stage magic and the genuinely deeply supernatural or paranormal. For now, let's go into our usual spoiler-free synopsis. Tom Flanagan is set into the oddest telling of his adolescence, itself a queer narrative indeed. Starting with his first year as a student of the prestigious Carson School, an elite high school in Arizona, and moving through to his time and tutelage in the mystical arts alongside his friend Del Nightingale, under the peculiar eye of Del's uncle, Coleman Collins. Collins gives the boys this trial of mentorship at his Vermont compound, the titular Shadowland. But Collins is not a simple practitioner of prestidigitation and card-craft charlatanism, no. Every summer for years he has been teaching his precocious nephew Del in the truly paranormal practice of real, no-bullshit magic, the manipulation of time, space, and reality itself. When Tom's father passes away during the school year, the first year at Carson, Del invites his friend Tom to join him after the school year for the summer at Shadowland, since Tom himself has expressed and exhibited an innate knack for magic and stagecraft himself. The year at Carson is beset by oddments of the surreal and ominous, particularly thanks to Steve Skeleton Ridpath, a senior and the headmaster's son. An adept of the supernatural with a deranged psyche, he is a misfit who terrorizes the first years, especially Del and Tom. When the school year ends in a tragic fire which consumes a secondary building on the Carson grounds and claims the life of a first-year student, Tom and Del are deeply disturbed, suspecting Skeleton Ridpath had a hand in it. The second and third acts of the novel focus entirely on Tom's time at Shadowland, introducing Coleman Collins, our tale's primary antagonist avatar, his hired hands, the Wandering Boys, and one Rose Armstrong, a young woman with a strongly shadowy background. Coleman's lessons to Tom and Del take on an oddly psychedelic aspect, and readers are treated to some powerfully bizarre scene construction via a blend of flashbacks, fugues, fairy tales, and metaphorical mythological treatises that make a mockery of classical narrative flow, but which enthrall absolutely. By the time one completes the reading, this book will leave them, I do not doubt, questioning the true nature of magic, mentorship, and mythos, and not in a bad way. Now, into the mechanical breakdown. Plot, 9 out of 10. Straub may end up causing some initial confusion with the way he ties events and scenes together throughout his stories, but when seemingly innocuous or secondary events reveal their significance later on, it is mind-blowing and satisfying in a way that few other authors can relate to their readers. It is a testament to his skill, as well as that the main through line of this novel's plot is, thematically speaking, introduced through events, characters, and settings all. The whole driving point of Shadowland leaves me wondering if this could have been delivered more tightly, but in hindsight, I think the answer to that is no. Peter Straub did exactly what he needed to and wasted no space. Characters, 8 out of 10. Tom Flanagan, the novel's principal protagonist, is a complicated central character to analyze and or root for throughout the first act, and until we get about a third of the way into Act 2, while he's still sympathetic, there's something that keeps him from being the sort of fully realized lead character that one can really invest themselves in. At that point, though, he becomes a lightning rod, opposite champion to the show-stopping cynicism and sinister nature that is Coleman Collins. In many ways, though frail Del Nightingale is Tom's lancer or support secondary character in the story, he becomes almost background noise to the clash of wills between young, innocent, and innately potentially powerful Tom and a man in Coleman who is only outmaliced by a man/entity referred to simply as M in the story. I suspect that likely stands for Mephistopheles or Old Scratch. Technique, narrative voice, 8 out of 10. I will confess that Straub's ethereal scenes are somewhat hard to make the strictest sense of sometimes, but they are poetic and impactful once the reader makes it through them. I do have to take a couple of points off, though, in technique, because even in high-octane, adrenaline-soaked moments of horrific happenings, he can get a little too purple-prosy, which seems out of place, given the scene's circumstances. Elsewise, though, Straub really puts you in the scene, the mood, and the atmosphere of the moment. World building, 8 out of 10. From the Carson School to the short time out of Tom's story, to Collins's wartime assignments, to Shadowland itself, Straub constructs each scene expertly and never leaves it feeling half-assed. Pacing, 6 out of 10. This is the weak spot in an erstwhile diamond of a story, amid a coal pile of schlock, thriller, or horror stories about magic that might try to copy Straub's genius. The time at Carson is well timed, yes, and Shadowland's first stretch feels about right, but the last quarter of the novel ends up feeling really kind of rushed, as if Peter Straub had 150 more pages with which to spread out events, but then he got a note from his agent or editor that he had to cinch his narrative belt to trim it down and yet still cram in the essence of that space into the plot. If we were to utilize a mathematical strict mechanic to average things out, the book would be a mere 7.8 out of 10, and that's largely also part and parcel because of a stylistic quibble that nevertheless was expertly carried off. You see, the narrator actually is unnamed, a former Carson student himself from Tom and Dell's class, who became an apparent novelist and the story's narrator. He's been cobbling together the story from several interviews that he holds over a number of years with Tom and other folks from his class. It's gathered out and spaced out over talks with Tom over the years, hence why Tom is centrally located in the plot. But it was carried out with such a plume that I have to give a tip of the hat to Mr. Straub, and give him the benefit of that 0.2, with a final score of 8 out of 10. In conclusion, Peter Straub's Shadowland is a thoroughly haunting tale of the supernatural, couched in the tension of a coming-of-age subplot for Tom Flanagan and Del Nightingale. It skillfully weaves mythos, mystery, and malice without a moment for dullness, even though the last stretch lurches and lunges a tad unevenly. Anyone vaguely interested in magic as metaphysics will find this novel inescapably gripping, and few modern storytellers could pull it off with the style of Straub. If you enjoy horror of the more thoughtful sort, I strongly urge you to get and read Shadowland. It is a solid read, even if you aren't huge on the horror genre. And that's all for me for today, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.